YouTube channel, aka Copper Colored Aboriginal. I want to give all praises to the Most High. And of course, to you all who are listening, I want to say welcome. Welcome. And sorry, I do have a cold. So, yeah, you're going to hear me make sounds every now and then. Because, yeah, I got this cold. But anyways, sorry, I'm going to be drinking my drink over here too. So, you're going to hear me pause every now and then. Oh man, this is good. Anyways, you guys will not be seeing it. There will be times where I will pause. I mean, I will mute the sound because I'm like either blowing my nose or something like that, right? To that effect. Because I still have this cold. This cold, or I think it's more so allergies than anything. Because I'm not coughing. I don't have anything going on, like, you know, no coughs, no fever, anything like that. It's just literally mucus buildup. So I think it's just the allergies. It is that time of the year. It is spring. Allergies are at all-time high, and yeah, me and my daughter both snotty nose, you know. So you will hear me pause. I ain't gonna be like doing all that stuff. Or not pause, mute. I will mute and just roll down the window, do what I gotta do, or whatever, right? But anyway, so yeah, this video that I'm making today actually was inspired by the conversation I was having with my wife this morning, right? And it was spurred by an idea. That conversation was actually spurred from an idea that I had this morning. So anyways, people who watch my videos, y'all essentially know what my ideology is, right? When it comes to our existence. I'm not gonna say that y'all fully know my ideology, but y'all pretty much know what I preach and teach, right? I preach and teach that so-called Black Americans have always been here. That we are the indigenous people of this land. Of course, we have admixture here too. Not all of us are 100% Indian. I think majority of our lineage is American Indian, but some of that lineage are the English, right? And the reason why I say English, sorry, European. I didn't mean English alone, but European, right? And the reason why I say that is because when the Europeans came here, there were millions of American Indians here. And we know that, yes, some of them were killed off in war, but majority of them were shipped out and or reclassified, right? Reclassified as Negro, right? That's one thing that I teach. Another thing is that there are multiple gods. The evidence is in the Bible. The evidence, I mean, hell, you don't even have to go into other books. I've stressed this. Simply just use the Bible. They show that there are other gods, right? And I mean, the Bible is very literal in these instances that I show you. It's not being philosophical. And, you know, it's not, you know, using any type of, what is the word I'm looking for right now? Sorry, I don't know what the hell this truck to the left of me is doing. I'm driving, by the way, so I am distracted. Oh, wait, that's not even that's his light is buggy. He need to get that shit replaced. Damn thing is like flashing bright. I don't know. But anyways, like I was saying, you know, the Bible's quite literal about it. It's not being metaphorical about there being multiple gods, right? And then you can go into these other books if you're curious, and you will see that it's, you know, these other books talk about these other gods that the Bible may just touch on just a little bit. Then another thing that I teach is multiple lives, right? How we've lived multiple lives, how this is just not our first go in this thing that we call life. That we have actually lived many lives before, and that we come through, over and over again until we get it right. And that kind of ties into, the whole multiple gods thing. Usually when I teach about one or the other, they go in tandem with each other. I usually I may start with one and then they run into each other, right? It's the same thing with the last thing that I kind of harp on also, right? I mean, I talk about a lot of things, but this next thing is, I talk about like Tartaria and, the old world kingdoms and so on and so forth, right? That usually ties into the first subject that I talk about, which is that us so-called black folks, us black Americans have always been here, right? And then another thing I talk about is, prepping and current events, right? So those are like the main subjects that I talk about on this channel. So today, in this video, what I'm essentially going to be talking about is, multiple lives and even some history, right? So what started the conversation with my wife was this thought that I had, right? So I went in, for people who don't know, I'm a truck driver, but the account that I drive, they work with this specific company. In this company, they manufacture and they move, they transport this product that they create, right, at their warehouses. I mean, at their plants or factories, whatever you want to call it. And, we take it to their different locations to where they'll take it to different customers, or sometimes we don't even take it to customers and they'll take the product and do what they will with it, right? So, as I'm walking into the warehouse, going to the employee area, and I hear two of the employees talking, right? One is manager, and one is like a manager or supervisor or something like that, right? While the other guy is like the manager, like the shift manager. And as they're talking about like some individual who is on their phone rather than working, right? So I come in, I'm like, oh, somebody's in here, on their phone rather than working. And the guy, mind you, both these guys are white. He responded, he said, word, or he said word, something like that, right? And I was just like, I kind of cringed at it. And I was like, I wasn't offended because, that's a phrase. I mean, I'm not going to say a phrase, but a word that black folks use, especially in the 70s. Yeah, like, man, for example, just use an example, like, they're like, yeah, man, my girl, she cheated on me, and the brother like, word? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how you use it in the proper context, right? But that was a word that people used in the 70s. Now, mind you, this guy, he definitely lived in the 70s because he looked like he was probably born in, like, maybe the 1960s. So when he said that to me, I'm like, that's odd because, black folks used that word back then, and he's using it with me, probably because I'm black, and I'm just like it just made yourself look like an idiot. It was just a cringeful moment, right? So anyways, as I'm walking out, I'm like, damn, he's using the word that's older than me. He's using it improperly, and the word is older than me. And I was like, yeah, in this lifetime. That's what I thought. I was like, in this lifetime. And that's what spurred on the thought. So I was like, okay, yeah, of course, this lifetime, because I was only born in the 80s, late 80s, in this lifetime. But then I was like, yeah, this lifetime. And I was like, in this lifetime, I know quite a bit. But did I, in my previous life, like my direct previous life, how much did I know? Did I know as much as I do now? Or was I just straight up just like this carnal, worldly person who was just stuck in the physical? I wasn't trying to dabble in spiritual things. How was I? Have I always been like that? Or could I have been completely carnal in my last life and then a very spiritual person in the life before that? Who knows? All I pretty much assume is that I didn't get it right in any of my lifetimes because I'm still here. Because essentially, if you get it right, you don't come back. You don't come back. Sorry, I'm about to mute real quick. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, like I was saying, if you get it right, you don't come back. You don't come back through the cycles, right? The true life cycle. And I believe that's where they get the phrase from, life cycle. Instead of it being animals eating other animals, and an animal dies, hurting the plants, and then another animal eats the plant. No. The true life cycle is when you die and you're reincarnated. That's the true life cycle. And I've said in previous videos before, I don't believe in hell as the Christian church teaches it. I don't believe in hell as the Hebrew Israelite church teaches it. I believe it's in between. It's somewhere in between, if you will, right? Because the Hebrew church, the Hebrew Israelites, which I was a part of for a very long time, some of them taught, not all of them, mind you, not all Hebrew Israelite church schools and congregations are the same. Camps are the same. They're actually different, right? There's a lot of them that are the same, and then there's some that are different, very different in some cases. Now, what your bigger camps teach is that hell is not a real place, and that is the furthest from the truth. They teach that hell is after this, I believe, Roman word, Gehenna, which simply means the grave, which means death. And they're right in a sense, but that's not all. There is a place, a fiery place, if you will, a place of torment and chastisement that you go to after you die if you did not live a righteous life and achieve what you were supposed to achieve in righteousness, right? And you can find out about this place. I mean, the Bible tells you a little bit about this place, right? Outer darkness, the weeping and gnashing of teeth is part of the place, but it's the permanent place, right? It talks about hell, it talks about that, right? But these other books, especially the books in the Nag Hammadi, goes more in detail about these places, right? So when you die and say you were a terrible person, yeah, you're going to go to hell. Even if you weren't like this diabolical, terrible person, you're going to go to hell. If you were a person that lived a wishy-washy life, you were, halfway there, you were lukewarm, yeah, you're going to go there. But if you were a good person, I'm not going to say decent, if you were a good person, you had a good heart, you accomplished what you were supposed to accomplish in this lifetime, you will go to what we call heaven, right? And I'm going to touch on heaven before I touch on the whole hell thing. So, heaven is temporary, just like hell is temporary. Heaven, or what people refer to as heaven, the idea of heaven, this place of bliss, do exist. There's a permanent place that you go, but that doesn't happen until the consummation of the age, until all is fulfilled, all is revealed. That doesn't happen until then, all right? That that doesn't happen till then. Sorry, just understand. I'm dealing with traffic, so if you hear me go quiet, it's either. If you hear me go quiet, you still hear the truck. That's because I'm focusing on this traffic. But anyways, like I was saying, so when it comes to the place of eternity, of eternal bliss, that doesn't happen till all is revealed, till Christ comes back and do away with everything, right? And he brings us to the Father, who is the Most High. Okay? But before then, there's a place that we go in the spiritual world that is heaven-like, if you will. I'm not going to say it's a place of complete bliss, because this place that you go to, you're still aware of what's going on in the spiritual world. I mean, in the physical world. You're still aware, right? And this is what the Bible calls in the New Testament. It's called the pillar, right? The altar, right? Or the pillar. I think it's the pillar, right? You read about in the book of Revelations. And I believe it's mentioned in other parts of the gospel too. Of course, that's where the souls of the saints are stored, and they're saying, how long, right? It's known in the Nag Hammadi as the treasury of light. That's where you go. What else is it known as? I think those are the three things that's known as: the pillar, heaven, and the treasury of light, right? I'm sure it's known as other things too. We read other books. But anyways, that's the temporary place. Oh yeah, the other thing is known as, sorry, I almost forgot, in the Old Testament is known as the bosom of Abraham. Okay? It's known as the bosom of Abraham. Oh, sorry, that's not the Old Testament. That is the book of, is it Luke, Matthew, or Mark? One of those, right? Where we read about Lazarus and the rich guy. So that's what that place is, right? The book of Matthew, Mark, and Luke is known as the bosom of Abraham, and the Revelations is known as the pillar, right? Where the souls are. The righteous souls. So that's where you go when you die a righteous person, a good person. But if you die and you're evil or you're lukewarm, the place that you're going to go is to this place that's hell-like. And it's a temporary place. Like I said, it's kind of like in between of what Hebrews teach and what Christians teach. Hebrews teach it don't exist. I'm just generalizing, right? And then your Christians teach that's the place you go forever. It's not. It's a place where you go for purification. So the example that I like giving is the example of gold. When you go mining for gold, oftentimes you find that it is mixed with impurities. And in order to get that purity, that pure gold, melt it down. You have to put it through the fire, right? Like how we are. We're supposed to be tried through the fire. Well, if you don't do it in this lifetime, you actually are tried through physical fire so that you can become that pure soul, right? Now, when you become that pure soul, you do not get to go to the pillar, nor do you get to go to the place after, the permanent place, all right? So I'm going to explain to you the process. You die, say you die a terrible person, you know. Let's say you killed somebody unjustly. You die, or you ain't even gotta do that. Let's just say like you lived a very carnal life. All about you, you know, you were a stripper, you did drugs, you were a drug dealer, and I'm just throwing out examples, right? And you die. For example, there was this young woman who was killed by her, I want to say like her, I don't really want to say her sugar daddy, but he's kind of like a sugar daddy to her. He was like her John, because he would pay her for sex, right? And this woman, she did porn. She did porn. She was a stripper, and she was messing with like multiple men, and she made a lot of money. She even did modeling, and I'm not gonna put her name out there. I'm not gonna do that. But this woman, and I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, when she died, she did not go to heaven. I know that her family has said, "Oh yeah, rest in peace in heaven," and all this shit. They made T-shirts, all this shit about her. And I'm just using this woman as an example. I'm not saying she's the only person who went through this, who's going to go through this. But when she died, I can guarantee you with 100% certainty, she did not go to the bliss. She did not go to the heavenly side. I can guarantee you that she went to hell. And I'm not saying that to be mean, nasty, sexist, anything like that. I'm telling you, this is what reality is. And the reason how I know this is reality is from the Bible, from different books in the Nag Hammadi, and then also people's near-death experiences that line up with the Bible, and more so lines up with books of the Nag Hammadi, right? So when she died and gave up her last breath, poor lady, because the way she died was gruesome. It was gruesome. She was poked up, right? She was poked to death, right? And that's a terrible way to go. That's a very traumatic way to go. So I can just imagine when she went into the spiritual world, she was just like in all sorts of chaos, right? And mind you, she lived a pretty good life. Like, the crazy thing is too, is that this woman had both her parents in her life, raised by both her parents. And I'm just looking at them both like, y'all are fucking failures. I look, even though I may not like the lifestyle that some of these people live, when they die, I don't put the whole blame on them, because I look at their parents like, y'all raised this person. This person is the way they are because y'all failed them as a fucking parent. Poor lady, her parents failed her. All this is unnecessary. Like, all that was so unnecessary, the way she lived and died. Right? Very carnal woman. Sold her flesh for money. And was helping men to get to hell with her, right? Through what she was doing, her activities. So when she died, and when you die as a terrible person, you usually go a few different ways. Sometimes when you die, it's instant darkness. And that's usually the theme. It's usually darkness. Some people actually see their bodies after they die, but that's usually reserved for the good people, right? Usually reserved for the good people, and I mean people when I say that. And I'll get in a little detail about what I mean about that, right? So she either went in a few different ways. She either went completely dark, start falling, instantaneously start falling, right? Into a void, downwards. And when you're falling, you hear all this demonic, hateful laughter. Like the most vile hatred. You can feel it, and you hear it as you're falling. And I know it's the entities laughing at you because they're like, we got you, sucker. We fucking got you. But everybody who describes that fall, they describe it as being the most scary, hateful, demonic sounds ever. And I bet, right? And then they fall, they see a light at the end of the tunnel as they're falling. And then they see the space open up into this massive hellscape, shall I say, right? Where they see fire, lava, all types of shit. I truly believe that hell is in the earth, right? I think it's in the earth. Because everyone who goes to hell, they say that they know that they're still on earth. And they know that they're under the earth, which is why I think Scripture always mentions under the earth. Don't worship anything that's under the earth. Because there's not only people under the earth, but there's entities under the earth also. So when they go down there, they usually hit the floor, right? And instantly they're in torment and pain and suffering. They can't breathe. It's described as being the worst place to ever be, to exist, because you can't breathe. Just imagine the feeling of suffocation 24/7. You're in pain. There's demons. There's monsters down there that are beating you, ripping you apart, laughing at you, saying so many hateful, evil things towards you. On top of that, they're scary. They're making weird shit happen to you, like rats come around, start eating you. You're locked down by the legs. Worms are devouring you, and it just happens over and over and over and over again, right? As a torment. And then you're being taken to different places and stuff, right? Now, there's different type of chastisements that will happen, and I think it's varying degrees on how you live, right? There's one that's like an apology tour. It's not hell. You essentially go on an apology tour, and you're taken around the world for like an X amount of years, right? But the one that I'm talking about is the hell that you go to. So you either fall into hell or you're taken through a tunnel system into hell. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, you're either taken into, you fall or you go through a tunnel system and you make it into hell that way, right? You either walk into hell or you fall into hell, right? You're guided into hell or you either fall into hell. I don't know why people get those, either you're guided into hell or you fall through hell. I don't know why there are those two different experiences, but I think the people who are guided into hell are actually like shown. I don't think that it's like a death experience. I think that their body leaves their soul and they journey into the place. Rather, with the people who have the near-death experiences, usually they die, like they're pronounced clinically dead, and they just drop into hell. While the other person, the people who were guided into hell through like a tunnel system, as they usually describe it, those are people who never really describe themselves as dying. Like they'd be like, oh yeah, I may have died in my sleep. No. You weren't pronounced clinically dead. You more than likely had an out-of-body experience. So I believe those are the people who have out-of-body experiences, and the people who actually die. They're the ones who drop into hell, right? They fall into hell. So anyways, that's more than likely what happened to that sister. She more than likely fell into hell. Like she died, it went black, she went down, right? Scary thing, right? But when you go down there, you're tortured. And you're not tortured forever. You know, you're begging, you're asking for forgiveness. Like everything that you did wrong is going through your head 24/7, right? Why? Because now you're in the stage of being purified. You're getting all the evil out your system. All that is being tortured and burned out of you, right? Like, you know how, you know, if you're kidnapped by a bad guy, let's say, or, you know, say a spy kidnaps you, or whatever, you know, they'll torture you until, like, at first you may be resistant, right? But then they would torture you until they get the information out of you, right? They're getting something out of you. Or sometimes they'll torture you until you conform. And they'll literally make a new person out of you after years of torture. Like I don't know if you ever heard of the stories before, but I've heard of different stories where people will go to like these camps, these different camps, and they'll be tortured. Like they'll go to either death camps or they'll go to like these prison camps where they'll be tortured and treated like scum for the rest of their lives, right? And I saw this one, there was this one story that I saw on YouTube about this there was this man who went to prison. It's crazy. Because he went to prison looking one way, or he went to this like death camp / prison camp place looking one way, looking completely healthy. I think it was like him and his brother, or him and his friend. They were both prosecuted and sent to this place. right? And they had appealed their case, right? They had appealed the verdict that they had gotten, but they had spent like 10 to like 15 years in this death camp. And by the time their verdict was appealed and overruled, and I guess they were found out to be innocent, because I think they were like framed for like killing somebody, and they didn't kill anybody. And the one guy, the friend, actually died. He died while being in prison in his death camp, and I believe it was in Russia. It could have been somewhere else. I mean, if y'all know the story, correct me if I'm wrong. But the main character dude, when he got out, he wasn't the same. He was a totally different person. Life was drained out of this man. Like he wasn't the same. And when he came out of prison, out of this death camp, I keep saying prison, when he came out of this death camp, where literally they would make him work every day. Like they were working them like slaves, right? Like making them do like laborious shit. Like I think they were like digging and mining or building shit. I can't remember what they were doing. But they were beaten, they were starved. All types of crazy, inhumane shit was happening to these people. And when they came and got him, released him from this death camp, he wasn't the same anymore. He was literally like a shell of a human. He was super skinny. I mean, this guy looked nothing like how he did originally. Nothing. Two totally different people. His eyes were going off in two different directions. I kid you not. He was skin and bones. And when he returned home, because I believe he had a wife and child. His child was like grown at this point, and his wife, I don't think she moved on. Maybe she did, because this guy may have went back to live with his mother, and he was just not the same. He was a shell of a human. He barely even talked, and it was like, yeah, he's a completely different. Like this is not our son. This is not our what's it called, because he's a totally different person now. But this dude had no life in him. Because they literally beat that shit out of him. Made him into a different person. And that's what happens when you're tortured. And I say that to say this. I said all that to say this about how hell is. Like, you're repenting, you're crying, you're begging for, Hamashiach, you're begging for forgiveness, repentance. All this shit is going on. Which is part of the purification process to make you into a different person, essentially. To purify your soul. And we know with gold, like I was saying earlier with the example, when you have all those impurities in gold, what do? You put it in the fire. You burn out all those impurities. And that's what happens when you're down there. You're getting all those impurities burnt out through that torture. So when you go into the next place, because people who go to hell and their near-death experience and they're being tortured, they always mention that there's a big gate, which is also mentioned in the Nag Hammadi. Go and check it out. Well, actually, it's mentioned in Piss and Sophia also. Go and check out that book. And, oftentimes people feel like that there's something with that gate that's the ultimate place. It's the end. It's the end. And they see souls are being marched through that gate. And those souls are telling the people that are there that experience this through the near-death experience, do not come here. Do not come here. Do not come here. Do not come here. And when those people go to that gate, the people who's experienced the near-death experience, they think that's the end place. But what actually happens is that the souls, they go into the next stage, which is the purification process. So think about it like this. They go down to hell, and they go to the gates after they're being purified. They go up, they go into the sea of forgetfulness, which is, just like gold. After you burn out all the impurities, you have that liquid. Now you got to turn that liquid back into a solid. You throw it into water, right? That's what happens to us. All of our past, all those evils, most of it is washed away. Because we're not going to say all of it, because sometimes we come into our life with memories of the past, which is why we have deja vu, so on and so forth, right? But also, you have people who fully remember everything, right? And I think that the older we get, after we go through all the trauma of life, we forget little by little. We start to lose our contact to our spiritual side, right? So anyways, we've lived multiple lives. This has happened to us many times in time. And if you fail, you keep going through the changes of souls, which is what it's called in the changes of bodies or something like that. It's the changes of something, right? And that's you can find that in the Nag Hammadi and also Pissa Sophia, where it talks about that in more detail. And if you're not, fulfilling your goals, and you're not being righteous, you go through that cycle over and over and over again until you get it right. You sit back. So anyways, going back to what I was thinking about this morning in the conversation with my wife, I was thinking like, damn, how many times have I lived this life? Because we're in this life that we're in right now, that this is the only life we have, or that we have ever have ever had, and that's not the case. We feel like we're special right now. We feel like, yeah, this is my life. I only got one life to live, but we don't realize we have lived many lives. We have lived multiple lives. Some of us have lived 3 lives. Some of us have lived hundreds of lives. Some of those lives we have lived for hundreds of years. Some of those lives we lived until our 70s, 60s. Some of us died young. Some of us died as babies. Some of us died in the womb. Some of us died violently. Some of us got to live out an old right life. You know what I'm saying? These are things that have happened. So, we've been in this state before where we're living and we're like, yeah, I'm alive right now, right? I've been through the trenches. But no, we have been there before. So we're not so special. You can die again, you know what I'm saying? And then come back tomorrow as something else, someone else, right? Because I think about my children. My children are very young. And, I was telling my wife this earlier, like, I pity them at times, like, not in a bad way, but like, damn, like, I feel bad for them because my son is 4. So before 4 years ago, he was someone else. And now here he is, have to relearn everything. And sometimes my son gets frustrated because he's so young, he can't communicate effectively because he doesn't have the faculties to do so. And it just sucks to be at that stage. Same thing with my baby girl. She's 1 year old. And she can't really communicate at all other than crying. And it's just like, damn, it sucks for them because they were just somebody else. And, I wonder who they were in the past life. Like, who were they? Were they someone from my lineage? Like, do you die and come back as someone else in your lineage? As a new member in your lineage? Or are you someone else from a completely different lineage? It's very interesting, the whole thought of it all. But yeah, man, I mean, it just really sucks, And it's crazy because had we not had the modern day Christian church, we would know these things. We would know about the multiple gods. We would know about have living multiple lives, reincarnation being real. Because hell, all these other cultures around the world outside of Christianity, and when I mean Christianity, I'm talking about modern day Judaism and Islam. All of those were started by Christianity, which was started by the Roman Catholic Church. Don't believe me? Do your research. There are other channels out there that do a deep dive into this. One of the recent ones is UBTV. Go and check them out. I had mentioned this years ago. You can go and look at my old videos where I mentioned that Islam and Judaism are nothing more than recent inventions. And when I mean recent, I mean like within the past few hundred years, or shall I say several hundred years, creation of the Catholic Church. I said this years ago, and UB finally, he made a video showing what I probably should have made years ago, honestly. Because I don't make any videos really anymore, like me diving into research that I found. Because usually I got so much going on in my life, I can't just go back through the archives and pull out a lot of this shit, right, and show you guys. So I usually just share with you guys verbally, right, the things that I've learned. But UB has done a good video recently showing the origins of, more so of Islam than Judaism, but all of them started with the Catholic Church. Why do you think they wear the same garments? They wear same or similar garments, like the little yarmulke looking thing on their heads. The popes, the Catholics wear those things, those little caps on their head. The Muslims wear those caps on their head. So do the Jewish folks wear those caps on their head. You know? It's because they all have the same similar origins. And the Catholic Church isn't the originator. There's actually stuff before the Catholic Church that the Catholic Church originated from. But anyways, they all started from the same, right? And if it wasn't for the Christian Church and its descendants, meaning Islam and Judaism, modern Judaism, we would know about these multiple gods, because every culture around the world teaches about these multiple gods and also teaches about reincarnation. In the Americas, the ancient cultures that were here talk about multiple gods and reincarnation. Asia, same way. Africa, same way. Australia, same way, right? That's because it's the truth. But the Roman Catholic Church destroyed all of that, right? There was a church before the Roman Catholic Church that existed in the British Isles called the Church of Isis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But it was a church that existed there in Ireland. Okay? Now, I may do a part 2 to this video because I'm not too far from where I need to be. But essentially, through history, so y'all know that I teach that America is the old world. It's the true old world, and what I mean by that is that all the ancient biblical kingdoms that we've heard about in the Bible, that we read about in the Bible, actually existed only here in the Americas, right? But then, after conquest of certain kingdoms, namely one of them being the Kingdom of Israel, a lot of those kingdoms split and they expanded or left to different regions of the Americas or to different parts of the world, right? And they left westward and eastward. Some of them went out into the Pacific and settled the islands over there, because America is Atlantis, which I shared with you guys before. America is Atlantis. So some of these kingdoms, when they fell, they fled and they went and formed new places. You know, like Lemuria, which was a giant island, a giant landmass, shall I say, on the Pacific, which is now sank below the seas. And the evidence is still there on maps. If you go and look at it, you know, even modern day maps, you'll see these roads that are under the sea in the Pacific. That's because that was part of Lemuria, parts that sank, right? But before Lemuria sank, they even went over to Asia, East Asia, as we call it, like, you know, China, Japan, stuff like that. They formed the cultures over there that exist over there, even to this very day, right? And some of the people went eastward, you know, what we call eastward of the United States. They crossed over to Mississippi and even, you know, set up kingdoms there. And there was already kingdoms there too, right? They already existed. And some of them went from the kingdoms that were over there and they crossed over the Atlantic and went into what we call the British Isles. And then they went into, you know, other parts of Europe, right? So you had people coming in from both ways from the Americas. You had them going east into the British Isles. Then you had people going west into Asia. And they even met. Those people even met up with each other, you know, years later. Some even several hundred years later, right? Even some of them being the same people, meeting up in Eurasia at different points in times, and even having wars with each other, you know? So, when the Romans came over, because the Romans originally started here in the Americas. When they came over to the British Isles, there were already people there. And when they came there, they conquered the people that were there, and they changed around a lot of the history, right? They took out books, so the Council of Nicaea, all of them. That happened after they conquered the British Isles. And they took the literature that was over there and they made their own versions of the literature, right? They changed a lot of the stuff around, a lot of it around. Took out all the other gods, took out reincarnation, took out other bits of history and facts and truth, right? And essentially, and I'm gonna give y'all a little, I guess, like visual, if you will, of the Americas being the old biblical world. So we all know about the story of Noah. Well, Noah was from the Americas. The wood that Noah used, the gopher wood, is a type of wood, like it's a part of the Acacia family, the tree family. That's the type of wood that he used. Why? Because that wood is the most buoyant. That wood can only be found, that specific wood that is used, that he used, can only be found in the Americas, which further proves that America is the true old world and that life started here in the Americas, or at least the earliest peoples were here in the Americas. So, sorry, I'm over here trying to get over to Southern Wayne. So anyways, like I was saying, you know, like I was saying, Noah was from the Americas. And during that time, during Noah's time, there were giants in the land. Of course, we know that. There was also giant trees too. And when the flood came, the giants, their way of trying to flee was climbing these giant trees. And I'm telling you, these trees, they went through, they were so tall that they went through the clouds. So these giants were climbing them in order to save their lives. And so were, you know, other humanity, you know, I mean, actual humans. They were trying to save their lives. And what happened was that the angels came, and, or the other deities, shall I say, came, and they cut down those trees to keep the giants from surviving, right? And when those trees fell, they became the mountains that we know today. So when the flood waters receded, Noah ended up on top of one of those cut down trees, right? Which was a mountain. And he was here in the Americas. And then, you know, him and his sons, he divided the land between him and his sons, his three sons, right? You know, Shem, Ham, Japheth. And when, you know, civilization bounced back and people started to spread out, they started to make these different civilizations, one of them being the Babylonian civilization, right? So when the Babylonians, let me go. Yeah, so when the Babylonians came on the scene, of course, they had a lot of people up under them, even different nations up under them. And they had a lot of civilizations under them. And when they fell, when the Tower of Babel fell, a lot of those people spread out and they went to different parts of the Americas, and then they also went across the sea into the Atlantic, right? And they went and formed me in this truck both went the wrong fucking way. It is what it is. I'm gonna have to take the same way that took before, which is pretty fucking tight, but hell, it is what it is. Damn. I got off a little too early. I'm supposed to go to a half a mile down the road and then get over, but totally fucked that one up. So anyways, like I was saying, I'm trying to remember which way I took last time. That woman better watch out. She's about to get her ass smashed. Let me see if I'm able to get back on. Because I may be able to get back on going this way. I'm about to follow this damn truck. I'm about to try to take a different way to see if I can get back on. Because, yeah, there is a loop around. Yeah, there is a loop around over here. Though I've never taken it before, I've seen it. But anyways, back to what I was saying about there's a loop around right here. And dude both made the same fucking mistake. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. But anyways, like I was saying, so after Babylon fell, you had the Tower of Babel fell. You had a lot of people who spread out, went to different places, right? Some of them went across the sea to the British Isles, right? Some of them went to the British Isles. Okay, let me make sure that. Yep, I'm back to where I left off at. Okay, yeah, someone went to the British Isles, and they formed what we call the, Chaldea, right? And those people is who Abraham descends from. Abraham descends from the Chaldeans, right? Chaldean people. Even though his people are originally from the Americas. So, when Abraham started to deal with the God of Israel, so let me make sure I'm going the right way. Okay, good. Yep, going the right way. After he started dealing with the God of Israel, he went back to the Americas. He had journeyed back to the Americas, right? And then that's when he, it wasn't just him. It was him, his nephew, who was Lot, and a lot of these different little servants that the Most High blessed him with, right? Or that the God of Israel blessed him with. And then, of course, that's where y'all know the history from there, right? Y'all at least know the biblical version of that history, right? Abraham's journey and all the stuff that he went through, his descendants, so on and so forth. Now, mind you, you have people who were living in the British Isles, Abraham's people, the people that were over there, right? And then after that, after Israel was formed, I'm talking about like the nation, after we went to Egypt, all that stuff, right? And we went on our conquest, we started conquering nations and, conquering the Canaanites, getting our land that was promised to us through Abraham. A lot of those nations that were being conquered, they fled. They were being pushed out. They weren't fully destroyed. They fled. They went to different areas. Some of them went out to the Pacific, and they populated the land that is Lemuria. And then they also went over to Asia, right? And then some of them went eastward, right? Into the other kingdoms, right? That are over there. Now, if you watch UB's video where he did a great job on showing Babylon, you know that Babylon is over there in the Canadian area. I can't remember which province it is, whatever they call it, but it's over there in Canada, right? And you see the big old circle up there, right? That's where Babylon, ancient Babylon, is, right? Ancient Babylon is the New York, all the way over to Ohio, up in different parts of Canada. That was Babylon. So, essentially, people went over to those areas and even fled over to, even fled over to different parts of Europe in different waves. Like people were coming over in different waves. So when the Babylonian Empire finally fell for the last time and the Assyrian Empire fell, it was during the time of the rise of the Romans, right? And the Romans, if you read the literature, you will see that the Romans are actually nothing more than Greco-Roman are nothing more than the same people. They're just different they're the same people just from different parts of time, right? Just like, for example, the descendants of the Europeans, we don't call them colonists today, yet they are descendants of the colonists, right? Why don't we call them the colonists? Because there's different culture. Cultures back in the 15, 16, 1700s is different than today's culture, right? Same thing with the Greco-Roman. This is why historians have always put the Greeks and the Romans together. Not only did they share similar culture, same culture, just like how we share similar culture to people who colonized these lands hundreds of years ago, but it's not exactly the same. It's the same thing with the Greco-Roman, right? So they're nothing more than the same people. And also the historians, this is why they literally had the same similar food, similar dress, culture, and everything, right? Building styles and all that. This is why historians also agree that the Greco-Roman were an amalgamation of different states, different peoples, just with similar cultures, right? The Greco-Roman are nothing more than what we call the Phoenicians. That's all the Greeks and the Romans were, right? But they became the Phoenicians after. The Greeks and the Romans are nothing more than an amalgamation of different kingdoms. They're nothing more than a mix of Babylonians, Assyrians, Egyptians, Israelites, like your Danites, for example, that lived amongst each other and shared similar cultures, right? Because let's just keep it stacked. All the biblical kingdoms have similar cultures, similar food, similar practices, and even spiritual systems, right? These were the remnants. These were the remnants of the fallen kingdoms, right? So they became the Greek and Romans. This is why the Greco-Roman culture thrived after the fall of the Babylonians, right? They were the main culture at that time. This is why you find a lot of Greco-Roman architecture on the east coast of the United States. Sure, it was everywhere because the Greco-Roman culture actually comes from the older biblical kingdoms, right? So the architecture was borrowed from them, and then the Greco-Romans actually kept it, and a lot of the Greco-Roman history is actually fabricated, by the way, right? Because the reason why they fabricate it and make up a lot of that shit is because they don't want you to know that these people were actually the Israelites, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, right? And sorry, I'm almost towards my destination, so this is why I'm kind of talking fast. So yeah, and then they later became known as the Phoenicians, which is also a group of people that were known as being an amalgamation of different nations, right? They never said the Phoenicians were just one group of people because that's not the truth. There were many groups of people that came together and kind of had a similar struggle and a similar mission, right? And then they came over later to the British Isles as the Romans, the Greeks and the Romans, or let me just say the Romans at this time, right? They came over as the Romans, and when they came over, they were conquering the people who had already been there, the people who came over in different waves, right? And people who had already been there the entire time, like some of the first settlers, like the Chaldeans, right? And they were conquering those descendants, right? And then these people installed their religions. They got rid of, because the people who came over there sooner than that, like the Danites, for example, the Danites came over with the Bible, the older Bibles, which is the Bible from the Church of Isis, right? They had the original Bible over there in Europe, but they didn't have everything because they left before Christ. The Danites, they left way before Christ. So they still had some of the older records from before, but they just didn't have what we call the New Testament, right? So they had the older books, and those books were untainted by the Romans. But then when the Romans came over here, they tainted everything. Go and check out Mind Unveiled. He gets a lot into detail about this. Shows a lot of evidence. Also evidence that the Greco-Roman architecture is way older than the Greco-Roman architecture that you find over in the Mediterranean. That the Romans first settled the British Isles before they even settled the Mediterranean. And there's a lot of proof of evidence on this. A lot of proof. There's even books written on this. So no, the Greeks and the Romans didn't start in the Mediterranean. That's the whole hijack, right? And mind you, all these folks were black. There were no white folks at this time. White people didn't exist. The only white people that existed at this time were giants. They were Nephilim hybrids, right? And in part 2, I will get more into that. I'll probably, if I remember, I'll try to get more into that about the Nephilim hybrids and so on and so forth. But the Greco-Romans first arrived into Eurasia via the British Isles. When they came over there, they scrubbed a lot of the history. They conquered the people, which is what we read about. And you can read about the British. I mean, you can read about the Romans in the British Isles, right? That history is there. See, they tell you everything, and then they throw lies on top of it to make you believe the bullshit, right? But that's the order of how it actually happened. The Romans came from the Americas, conquered the British Isles, and then they spread throughout Eurasia. They even went as far as Asia, like China, right? But mind you, you already had black folks or melanated folks who left from the western coast of the Americas and went out to the Pacific, started Lemuria. Lemuria fell, and they spread out throughout Eurasia, through Asia, right? Through the like China, and then they went westward into Europe, right? So there were different waves of people, and then after that, those melanated folks, they went down into Africa, right? In different waves, many different waves. Some of them as recent, as recent as the 1800s, right? A lot of the royalty in Europe from Germany came down there, and from France came down into Africa in the 1800s and early 1900s, and now they're claiming that they have been there, right? And that's not the truth. So, anyways, I'll probably do a part 2. I will talk to y'all later. Peace out, shalom, and may the God of Israel bless all those who do his will. Peace.